Eritrea, a small but strategically important country on the Red Sea. Russia, a global power seeking new allies and influence. And between them lies one of the most critical waterways on Earth, the Red Sea. Why is Russia suddenly turning its attention to Eritrea? And how could this reshape the balance of power in the Horn of Africa, the Middle East, and the wider world? Today we explore the hidden story of Eritrea and Russia, and the rising tensions across the Red Sea. The Red Sea is more than just a body of water. It is one of the busiest maritime highways in the world. Every single day, millions of barrels of oil and natural gas pass through here, along with countless tons of goods. In fact, about 10% of global trade depends on this narrow corridor. The southern entrance to the Red Sea, known as the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, is only 30 kilometers wide. Whoever controls this choke point has the ability to influence, or even disrupt, the lifeline of global commerce. That is why so many major powers have already placed themselves here. The United States Navy patrols the waters from its base in Djibouti. China has built its first overseas military base just a few kilometers away. Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and even smaller Gulf states all maintain influence around the Red Sea. And now, Russia wants to join the game. Eritrea, though small, is blessed with geography. Its coastline stretches more than 1,000 kilometers along the Red Sea. The ports of Massawa and Assab are natural gateways for international shipping. But Eritrea has also been one of the most isolated nations in Africa. For decades, it was accused of authoritarian rule under President Isaias Afwerki. It faced sanctions and political pressure from the West. This international isolation, however, has created an opportunity. Russia sees Eritrea as a country that is not closely tied to the United States, the European Union, or China. It sees Eritrea as a clean slate, a place where Moscow can build influence without competing directly with its rivals. Russia's strategy in Africa, and especially around the Red Sea, is part of a much larger vision. Since the days of the Cold War, Moscow has sought access to warm water ports. Russia's northern ports often freeze during the long winters, limiting naval operations. For this reason, the Soviet Union once maintained bases in places like Somalia, Ethiopia, and even Yemen. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia lost much of this influence. But in recent years, under President Vladimir Putin, Moscow has returned to Africa with renewed determination. A naval base in Eritrea would give Russia direct access to the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. It would allow Russian warships to refuel, resupply, and project power into both the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean. It would also serve as a counterbalance to the United States and NATO presence in the region. For Eritrea, this partnership is not only about geopolitics, but also survival. The country has been under heavy international pressure. Its economy is weak, its young people continue to leave in search of opportunities abroad, and it faces long-term tensions with neighbors such as Ethiopia and Djibouti. By aligning with Russia, Eritrea gains several benefits. It gains military support, weapons, and training. It gains economic investment, particularly in infrastructure and ports. And most importantly, it gains a powerful ally on the world stage, someone who can defend it from Western criticism and sanctions. In other words, Eritrea is using Russia to secure its own future and to increase its leverage in the region. But this partnership also raises alarm among other powers. The United States views Russia's involvement as a direct challenge to its influence in Africa. Washington has relied on its military presence in Djibouti for counterterrorism operations, surveillance, and protection of trade routes. A Russian base only a few hundred kilometers away would complicate this dominance. China, which has invested billions in Djibouti's ports and infrastructure, also sees Russia as a competitor. The Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, worry that new rivalries could disrupt the flow of oil and trade upon which their economies depend. In short, the Red Sea is becoming a crowded chessboard where every move could spark a new rivalry. The story of Russia and Eritrea cannot be understood without looking at history. During the Cold War, the Horn of Africa was a key battleground for influence between the United States and the Soviet Union. At different times, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea all became pawns in this global struggle. When the Cold War ended, the region was largely abandoned, left to internal wars, famine, and instability. Now, with global competition rising again, the same waters and the same countries are once again becoming strategic prizes. Russia's renewed interest in Eritrea is a continuation of that history, but in a new multipolar world. Some analysts argue that Russia is not only seeking a military advantage, but also an economic and symbolic one. A Red Sea base would give Moscow the ability to challenge the United States Navy in one of the world's most vital regions. It would allow Russia to participate more directly in protecting shipping routes, or, in times of crisis, to threaten them. Symbolically, it would send a clear message that Russia is not isolated by Western sanctions, but is instead expanding its global footprint. For Eritrea, the stakes are equally high. Partnering with Russia could bring investment and security guarantees, but it could also make Eritrea a target in future conflicts. If the rivalry between Russia and the West intensifies, Eritrea could find itself caught in the middle, vulnerable to pressure, sanctions, or even military escalation. Eritrea's leadership is betting that Russia's support will strengthen the country's position, but honestly, history has shown that small nations caught between great powers often pay the highest price. Meanwhile, the wider region is, watching closely. Ethiopia, still recovering from its internal conflicts, worries about being surrounded by foreign powers. Djibouti, already home to American, Chinese, French, and Japanese bases, could lose business to Eritrean ports if Russia invests heavily there. Sudan, once considered Russia's top candidate for a Red Sea base, is now too unstable, leaving the door wide open for Eritrea. The Gulf states across the water fear that new rivalries could spill over into their own security. And Europe, which depends heavily on trade through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, knows that any instability here could trigger an economic crisis back home. So, what does this all mean for the future of the Red Sea? If Russia succeeds in building a naval base in Eritrea, the balance of power will shift dramatically. The region will no longer be dominated solely by the United States and its allies. Instead, a new balance will emerge, where multiple great powers, the United States, China, Russia, Turkey, and the Gulf states, all compete side by side. This could lead to new alliances, new trade opportunities, and perhaps even, greater stability if managed well. But it could also lead to dangerous escalation, where small incidents spiral into larger confrontations. The Red Sea, once simply a trade route, could become one of the most militarized and contested waterways on the planet. Eritrea has placed its bet on Russia. For President Isaias Afwerki, this partnership represents a chance to break free from isolation, to secure international recognition, and to strengthen his hold on power. For Russia, Eritrea is a gateway, a chance to project influence into Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian Ocean. Together, they are reshaping the geopolitics of the Red Sea. But whether this gamble will bring security, or whether it will drag Eritrea into the center of future conflicts, well, that remains to be seen. This was Eritrea and Russia. Red Sea tensions explained. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into global geopolitics. And let me ask you, do you think Russia's presence in the Red Sea will bring stability, or will it create even more conflict? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.